Howdy, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the Dusty Trails and Tall Tales podcast, where we celebrate the voices keeping the spirit of the Old West alive. I'm your host, Matthew, and today we're joined by a man who's chronicled the real life stories of the West for decades. He's an award winning journalist and longtime contributor to Livestock Weekly. He's also the co author of The Familiar Stranger, the final novel by Western writer Elmer Kelton. Please welcome John Bradshaw to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Sure, glad to have you. Well, tell us a little bit about your background and what drew you to writing.
I always had an interest in writing growing up. I don't know, I read a lot even as a small child, and I always had it in the back of my mind that I wanted to be a writer, and uh, I didn't pursue it in college, although I wanted to because I don't know, everybody told me you didn't get paid enough as a writer, so I went another direction and I immediately regretted it. And after college, I started freelancing for some magazines and newspapers. They were all something to do with ranching or a lot of horse magazines and horseshoeing because I was shoeing horses for a living. I, I'm the son of a horseshoer and I shod horses all the way through college and for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years afterward. And I slowly let the journalism take over the shoeing until finally Livestock Weekly offered me a full-time job. I grew up reading Livestock Weekly and, in the ranching industry, particularly in Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, the Southwest, Livestock Weekly is a big deal. So that was always a goal, and that was honestly a dream job for me to go to work for Livestock Weekly. And I freelanced for Livestock Weekly for 2 or 3 years. Then I was a staff writer for 12. And then I've been freelancing again for them for, I don't know, about 5 years or so now. But I always wanted to write fiction, but I never really was confident enough in my imagination. And I had begun to write quite a few fiction short stories, but I don't know, some of them are not very good. Maybe some of them are, but I was slowly progressing into that, and I had some book ideas, and I had just kind of started a fiction manuscript. But Steve Kelton was my editor at Livestock Weekly, and Steve and I were really good friends. And Elmer had written 3 books with Huey Calloway, and then after Elmer passed away, Steve wrote another one using Huey Calloway, and it's called The Unlikely Lawman. And then Steve had begun The Familiar Stranger when he passed away in 2022. And I was just fortunate enough that Steve's widow, Karen, asked me to take over the manuscript.
Were you familiar with Elmer before? Have you spoken with him?
Yes, I met Elmer. We had one really big talk it was in Lubbock at the Cowboy Symposium that they no longer have. And uh, Elmer was a really, really nice man, very humble and encouraging. And I've probably read all of Elmer's books, if not all, nearly all of them. And, I started reading Elmer's books when I was a kid because, you know, he had a bunch of books before I was ever born. So Elmer was my hero. So, having that big conversation where he was giving me some tips and encouragement, that meant a lot to me. Plus, Elmer wrote for Livestock Weekly and was the editor of Livestock Weekly, and then Steve was, and then I was. So I kind of that was a big thing for me too, just to follow in Elmer's footsteps on that path, and then to
Yeah.
get to follow in him in this is an even bigger deal for me.
It sounds like Elmer is your hero the way Louis L'Amour is than a hero for me.
Yeah, I would say that's probably accurate.
Yeah, as I probably read everything Louis L'Amour wrote.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that Elmer left unfinished, or is there anything else that you're working on?
Elmer had Elmer had the idea for the familiar stranger. It was a pretty vague idea where Huey Calloway goes to Canada. And he had a few notes on that, and I have those notes. But he had another idea too, because he had mentioned in the previous books about how Huey had gone to Cuba with Teddy Roosevelt. And I started that book, but I'm giving it a lot of thought. I have since written another Huey Calloway book because I made a deal with the Elmer Kelton estate to continue with the Huey Calloway character and the whole cast of characters.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic.
That one, the one that I've already written and finished and I'm trying to get published, it was not Elmer's idea, but he did have the idea of Huey of writing an entire book about Huey going to Cuba, and I'm giving that a lot of thought and will likely do it.
Is that's what you're working on next?
No, I haven't started that Cuba one yet. Uh, I finished the manuscript for another Huey Calloway, and then I took off writing just a neo western. I don't know, try something different for one.
Yeah. Are you planning any of your own work and own
Yeah,
stories?
yeah, that one, and I'm about three-fourths done with a rough draft on that manuscript on my own work there, and then I've also finished and I'm working on getting published a nonfiction, and it's a profile on a man from Mertzen, Texas, who was a Vietnam medevac helicopter pilot, and he served two really exciting tours there and saw an incredible amount of action. And then when he returned to Texas, he started a helicopter company and had been in business for 40 or 50 years, gathering livestock and doing predator control, all from a helicopter. He's a lifetime helicopter man, and so I had written about him two or three times in Livestock Weekly, and he had enough stories for a book, and
Yeah.
so yeah.
I've got a question from Mike here. What kind of writing did you do? Do you do for Livestock Weekly? Are you still the editor?
No, I was never the editor. I was only ever a staff writer and now a freelancer. But
Uh,
I did all kinds of stuff. I did the drudge work of market reports, which I hated, but somebody has to do it. And I was the low man on the totem pole. And I guess I stayed that way because they never let me quit. But there were also news stories, just whatever was happening in the ranching industry, all sorts of stuff. Livestock Weekly covers anything to do with ranching: horses, cattle, sheep, goats, a little bit of hunting as it pertains to landowners. My favorite thing for Livestock Weekly, and about all I do anymore, are some feature stories. Livestock Weekly's always done features on, it's typically an older man or woman, but sometimes it's a younger one, but just somebody interesting. Like, my favorites were just old cowboys who had, just had good stories to tell. Like,
yeah,
I'd sit down and get them to tell me wild cowboying stories about, when they roped a maverick bull and it jerked their horse over sideways. Just, I don't know. Those were my favorites. And that's what I
yeah.
thought I did best.
Well, how did you feel like your work for Livestock Weekly translates into your fiction? Has it helped you any, or
Yeah, I would say it has for sure. I mean, for one thing, it taught me how to write, and I know that's nonfiction versus fiction, but it taught me how to make myself sit down in front of the computer and write like a job. And but also I met all those interesting people and all those old cowboys that I wrote stories about. I filed those away in the back of my head, and some of that comes out.
Yeah. What was it like collaborating with Steve?
Well, since Steve had died, it was very difficult.
Yeah.
The manuscript came to me with 15,000 words and about a half a page outline, and that was it. And Steve had written about half the first chapter and half the last chapter, and then a fourth of a bunch of random chapters throughout. And his outline was far too vague for me to know how the characters got from this point to this point to this point. And that in the book the characters travel from Colorado to Canada, so I had big gaps. The characters might be in Colorado and then the next point they're in Wyoming, and I had to figure out what had happened to them in Steve's mind in there. And I feel like Steve probably had all that figured out, but he had not written it down. So
Yeah.
I I had to spend a lot of time basically trying to get in the mind of my dead friend, just figure
Yeah.
out the plan. So
What was your approach? More or less trying to maintain his voice or in style, or does your voice and writing style come into it?
no, I tried to stay true to Elmer's style. I think that Steve had tried to stay very true to Elmer's style and voice. And I think that Steve did a very good job in The Unlikely Lawman and then what he had written there. And, since the book's titled Elmer Kelton's The Familiar Stranger, we tried our best to maintain Elmer's style and stay true to Elmer's characters. And I had already read, Elmer's three books. I read them multiple times, and the three books with Huey Calloway in them. So I felt like I already knew Huey pretty well, but I went back and read those books and studied them, and I studied Elmer's style, and I tried my best to stay accurate to all that and stay accurate to Steve. So yeah, I mean, my style got in there and my ideas, but I I tried to stay true to what those men had done before me.
Was there anything that surprised you during that process that you learned?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I don't know. I'd have to think about that one a minute.
Hmm.
The whole thing was surprising. I was surprised that I was able to finish it, to tell you the truth, but I just stayed hooked until I did.
Yeah. Well, how has the response been from longtime Elmer Kelton fans?
It's actually been really good, and that's that's probably the biggest compliment anybody has given me, and I've heard it several times. People say reads like an Elmer Kelton, and
Well,
I'm sure there are other ones out there that are saying this ain't no Elmer Kelton, but luckily they hadn't told me that. So, the response has been
yeah.
good, and I do like that. I've had a lot of compliments, but that one means the most to me.
Yeah. Or do you have a favorite scene or passage from the book?
I I couldn't quote a passage probably, but one of my favorite scenes is when Huey makes a deal with a blacksmith in Wyoming because Huey is broke, but his horse needs shod. So he makes a deal with the local blacksmith that he will help that man shoe two mules, and then that man will loan him the tools and supplies for Huey to shoe his own horse.
Hmm.
And that was a fun scene for me. And I don't know, it's really heavy on the horseshoeing stuff, and it might bore some people, but I grew up in that world and I knew a lot about it. And I made that old blacksmith a smart mouth, and he was
Yeah.
teasing Huey a lot. And that was a fun scene for me.
Yeah. Well, they say you write about what you know.
Yeah, that's right. That limits me pretty hard, but
So, In addition to shoeing horses, do you have like a working ranch? Do you own a ranch? Or,
Yeah, it's pretty small as far as ranches go, but oh, we own about a section of land, and we've got, I don't know, a couple hundred head of sheep, goats, and cattle, horses.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you use any of your real life experience in your writing?
Oh yeah, I'd say so. Just I this book and then my subsequent works are really heavy on the horse stuff because I grew up shoeing horses, but also I've I train a lot of horses. I show ranch horses, so I think anything I ever write's going to be heavy on the horse end of it, and
Yeah.
I want that stuff to be accurate. When I read a western or watch a western movie and the horse stuff is inaccurate, it aggravates me pretty terribly. So that's one of the only things I might be able to make accurate. But so
Yeah.
yeah, I use that a lot. My
Yeah.
my new book that I'm working on, the neo western, it's got a lot of horse stuff, but a lot of border collies, working border collies, and I do that as well. So all that stuff kind of
Yeah.
leads into the books.
But what's your writing routine look like up when you're working on something?
It's so varied that it's not even a routine.
Well,
I would like to have a routine, but because we have all this livestock, it kind of takes priority. I have to go check everything first
yeah.
thing in the morning, and sometimes everything's fine and I can come back and sit down and write for half a day, and sometimes there are problems and I don't get to write too much, but I do try to write every day. If I have enough time to sit down and really write, I have a goal of 1,000 words, and sometimes I can double that even, and sometimes I might write 100 words. So there is no routine.
But do you find nonfiction or fiction more challenging?
Oh, fiction for sure. Probably just because I have so much practice with nonfiction through the newspaper and magazines. But yeah, fiction's far more challenging.
Yeah.
But it's also a lot more fun and rewarding, so
Yeah.
evens out.
What's the key to good storytelling in your opinion?
I would say keeping, whether it's a newspaper story or a book, keeping things simple enough and enjoyable enough that the reader wants to continue with it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of nonfiction, no matter what it is, whether it's a newspaper, a magazine, or a book, it bores people and they quit reading after the first paragraph or two. And fiction's the same way, maybe not quite as bad, but
How do you balance in your fiction historical accuracy and as far as shoeing horses or realism with creating a good story? Do you take historical liberties, I guess is what I'm asking?
I tried not to take any historical liberties. And like you ask about the shoeing specifically, and I know enough about that to know what it was like then. And honestly, shoeing hasn't changed that much. I mean, there's a lot of technology today that they didn't have back then, but the basics of the deal are the same. So that
Yeah.
one wasn't hard, but I did do a lot of research. Like Huey goes to the Cheyenne Frontier Days in The Familiar Stranger. Well, I called and talked to the museum in Cheyenne and asked them, and they were actually very helpful and sent me really old newspaper articles and photos. And so I think I was somewhat accurate on that, and I certainly tried to be.
Yeah.
So I don't I don't think that took away from the story being accurate on those things. It didn't hurt us too bad.
Yeah. Who's
But
your
that
favorite?
that was
Who's your
Elmer's style too. Elmer was he was real big on accuracy, and
Yeah,
he had a lot of historical facts in there, so kind of
yeah.
fit.
Who's your favorite character in The Familiar Stranger?
Oh, it's got to be Huey, just because he's the main character, but I felt like I knew Huey before, and I really felt like I knew him by the time I got done. But yeah, he's my favorite.
Yeah. Well, since you've pretty much read all of Elmer Kelton, which of his books are your favorite, and which do you think somebody who's never read him before needs to start with?
Probably his most famous work, and one of my favorites, is The Time It Never Rained. And that is a wonderful book. It's really sad, and the poor man in there, just everything goes wrong for him. But it's a wonderful book. The Man Who Rode Midnight is probably my favorite, so I recommend that one.
As far as westerns in general, how do you think the genre has fared recently, and where do you see it going in the future?
I think over the last 20 years, 5 to 10 for sure, the genre has suffered terribly, and not nearly as many people read westerns as they used to. But maybe in the last couple of years, there's been such a resurgence in western movies, and Yellowstone has brought so much attention to western movies and TV shows, that I'm hopeful that people will start reading westerns again. I have a lot of hope for that.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite western movies?
The Cowboys, I would say, is probably Silverado. I wore out a VHS tape of Silverado when I was a kid. Um, uh, Lonesome Dove. Everybody loves Lonesome Dove. So do
Yeah.
I.
Yeah. I talked to Farmer not long ago. He was in Silverado,
Yeah,
and he's pretty cool guy to talk to. He can tell some pretty crazy stories.
yeah. That's a great movie.
I got a question from Mike here. Another one. Do you feel like someone will feel it? Is it a pet to you, or are they just a horse?
Well, on the last part, they're not like a pet. Uh, they're somewhere in between. I have cattle, and I have a little pet dog about that tall, and the horse is somewhere in between, because while they're not a pet, they're not just livestock either. They have a lot more personality and quirks, and you have to deal with them. You know, they have to trust you, and you have to trust them. But what it's like to work with horses, it's a lot of fun most of the time, and incredibly frustrating at times. Depends. I guess it depends on the situation and the horse. When I was younger, I rode a lot of young horses, and that's very rewarding, but it's also very challenging and frustrating at times. I still show a lot of ranch horses, and that's a lot of fun. Showing the ranch horses has been a good deal for me, and I enjoy it a lot.
If you could sit down and interview a historical figure from the Old West, who would it be?
Any of the guys that were at the Alamo, because that's such a tragic but cool story. I don't
Yeah,
know. I'd like to know what they were thinking in the days before that ended.
yeah.
That'd probably be my best answer at the moment.
Or are there any? Do you have any other favorite writers besides Elmer Kelton?
Yeah, I have a lot. You want Western authors or in general?
Just in general.
In general, John Sanford is one of my favorites. Carl Hyacin, Don Winslow. Um, as far as Westerns, I really like Elmore Leonard. I mean, not just his Westerns, but I like Elmore Leonard's Westerns a lot. Larry McMurtry, Cormac McCarthy.
Really?
Yeah, even though some of his books are really difficult to read, I enjoy them.
Well, as far as the future of the Western, where do you see it going?
I don't know because although I'm hopeful that interest in Western fiction will come up, I'm afraid that too many young people today don't read that much in general, and I don't know, if they're gonna want to read westerns at all. So I'm hopeful, but my hope's a little subdued, I guess.
Yeah,
I think westerns are here to stay, and I think the popularity is going to go up, but it's not going back to where it was 50 years ago.
yeah.
I don't see that.
Well, how can we keep the legacy of the West alive for future generations?
I don't know. We got to try to write some good books, and as much as I hate to say it, they need to keep making TV shows and movies because I feel like that's where the renewed interest is coming from. So I think that's a good avenue. Get kids out there around it. That's a lot of the problem, I think. Too many kids have never been around horses or livestock, and they have no interest whatsoever. I think that the young people who are around that stuff, they probably read westerns. So I don't know how
Yeah,
to make that happen, but that would help.
yeah. So, what do you hope people take away from the familiar stranger?
I just hope they take away a good mood. I hope they enjoy reading it. You know, that's all it was meant to be, is
Yeah.
a fun read.
When can we expect your next book or your next fiction?
I don't know. I'm working on getting a publisher on it right now, so I wouldn't venture a guess. I know that the familiar stranger, from the time that I got the contract, it took, you know, what did it take? Well over a year. So I don't know. It could be a while.
Yeah. Well, is there anything you would like for our viewers to know about you?
Yeah, just stay tuned. Stay tuned for another Huey Calloway adventure. It'll be here at some point. Stay tuned for that nonfiction on the helicopter pilot because I think that'll be an enjoyable read for people. Lots more after that.
Yeah. Well, what's the best way for our viewers to find you on social media?
Yeah, I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I have a website, johnbradshawbooks.com, and you can find a lot of information. You can find links to where to purchase the book. You can find links to my social media. So go
All
there.
right.
It'll it'll take you anywhere you need to go.
Alrighty. Well, John, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me.